All right. We'll start with our second session. We'll hear a bunch of the customer success story. We'll have a great panel today. Our first guest speaker, Doug Murdoch, State CIO. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, the second one. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Our second guest speaker here is Mark Choi, Exec Director from DHS. Mark? Thanks, Mark. You see the second one. Yeah, next to that. And our third speaker, Ed Sniffen, Director of DOT. And our final speaker here is from University of Hawaii CIO, Gary Yoshimi. Thanks for coming. And join me with my co-host is Amanda Stange. Can we have 2 more mics here?
We can pass them.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, sure, okay.
That's right, just talk loud.
I'll just have my own. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah. Thank you. You can tell there's no rehearsal for this here. We're going to ask random questions, very tough questions to this. But I feel really, really honored today because we have the leaders in Hawaii, all the visionary leaders that did great works here for the state of Hawaii. I feel extremely honored. Thank you for spending time. I know you all have a lot busy schedule. Come out this mornings to speak to our audience. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
With that, maybe we'll start with, I know this group requires no introduction for the audience, but I will still maybe have you, Doug, from you here, to maybe just give a quick intro for what you do and for the state of Hawaii. Yeah.
I am Doug Murdoch. Hi, I'm Doug Murdoch. I'm the state CIO for the executive branch. And I've been here for about 4 years, so going into my 5th year, and just try and do strategy for the state executive branch, make sure we're moving ahead in the right direction.
Hi, Mark Choi. I'm with the Department of Human Services. I oversee all of IT security in the program management office.
Ed Sniffen with the DOT. I was in highways before. Now the designated for director in that position, so adding in airports and harbors as well.
Morning, everybody. Garrett Yoshimi, Vice President for IT and CIO for the university. We have oversight over the statewide university system, so 10 campuses, all islands, about 50,000 student headcount. In my spare time, I also help to orchestrate the state's broadband investments for all the inbound federal investments.
Yep. You guys have any questions, prepare those. We have lunchtime. I hope you guys can stay here for a little bit, so we'll ask them questions. My first question, maybe that's for all of you here, is that how has cloud changed the way government operates and serves the citizen in the recent years, especially for the state of Hawaii? Maybe I'll start with Doug.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. My goal really is to have everybody be online instead of in line. I don't want any lines in offices. I don't want people to have to go in and just ask a question. So we try and put as much information online as we can, and we want to have as much interactive technology as we can. One of the keys to that is identity, because one of the reasons we make people come into the office is to prove who they are. So we are working on a more secure identity management system right now for the state, so that even less people will have to come and stand in line in state office buildings, and that's our goal. But cloud makes a lot of that possible.
Mark?
Well, for us, our cloud journey began right at the beginning of COVID. So it allowed us to basically respond to the public need much quicker than we could if we were just trying to leverage our internal technology.
For DOT, it's all about transparency and efficiency, making sure that we get more data out to the public more real time, ensuring that we can do more business online with the residents to ensure that you don't have to come in, but also internally making sure all that data is available to our staff to ensure that we can make better decisions quicker to deliver faster.
For us, our journey started probably in excess of 10 years ago. We were, the University of Hawaii was one of the first Google Suite or G Suite schools on a national basis. So we adopted the Gmail and the G Suite pretty early on, put it across all of our staff, faculty, and students. So that's one really big piece for us. Just to put it in perspective, prior to adopting G Suite, we were running our own email service, like most people did 10 or 12 or 20 years ago, maybe 100 years ago. But the running your own email service comes with all kinds of stuff, and you constantly are chasing upgrades and updates, and it just wasn't working for us. So the G Suite option gave us a really good alternative to put the services into the cloud, and basically lifted that task off of staff, so we didn't have to deal with it anymore. We didn't have to deal with capital upgrades. Lots of the benefits of the cloud what came directly with the G Suite. Again, that was probably over 10 years ago. Over that period of time, we've also started to move some of our enterprise stuff into the cloud. Unlike some of our peers on the mainland, we are not 100% all in on the cloud. We have to, in part because of the water between us and the rest of the world, we have to balance our assets. So we do have significant assets on-prem, but we are looking to, as we move and migrate our systems into the future, provide a bridge between cloud-based services as well as on-premise services. We want a good balance, if for nothing else, to maintain, close your ears, Daniel, maintain price leverage on all of our vendors as we go forward. But that's just one of the pieces. The reach and the ability to get everybody connected, especially for our global community. We service, roughly speaking, about 150,000 customers on a global basis. So, it is important for us to make sure that reach is there, network super important, but also to make sure we have reliable, solid services upon which to rely. And the cloud that really gives us that ability to move.
Yeah, I'll just add a comment to this. I got a chance to had a tour with your data center in UC. That was one of the state-of-the-art data center, yeah.
Fantastic. So next question for all of you. Doug, we'll start with you if that's okay. What challenges have you faced when implementing new technologies, and how have you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenges that we have are just the mindset of people that are happy with the technology that they have. They maybe don't see the upside of moving into something new, and so it's generally the technology is going to work fine. It's organizational change management to get the people on board, and sometimes to modify the processes and do all that training. So the biggest problem is almost always, training the people, including the IT staff, to be comfortable with the new technology they want to bring on board. But I will say we learned, for example, during Safe Travels, that people were much more tech savvy than we expected. People were very easily able to fill out the forms on their phones, online, get into the call center, get answers to questions. So we had 12.1 million people going to Safe Travels. So it was really pretty easy for people. People kept telling me, well, how are people going to get in? They don't know how to use their phones and things. Well, yes, they do. They do it with their banks, and they do it for email, and they do it for all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, I'm borrowing from the Safe Travel apps. That's why I created QR codes. Yeah, QR codes.
Thank you.
Mark.
And Mark?
Well, for us, it's basically similar. I mean, it stems around the people. So a lot of what we were doing with the new technologies, with cloud, with some of the cloud services that we were implementing, some of the skill sets, some of the knowledge, some of the expertise wasn't there. So it took us time to sort of build that capacity. We're still a long way to go, but then we look to leverage our partners for that.
Great point.
To add on, I think the problem was twofold as we went forward. One was, there's a discussion of that's the way we've always done it, so that's where we want to move forward. That's one of the big difficulties. The other part of it, and I think we all recognize this in state agencies, there's gatekeepers in different locations. When I first started with DOT, for me to deliver my first project, In order to get the volumes on the roadway that I need to design, I had to send a letter to the planning branch that was 2 doors down from me. I couldn't walk in and get it. I had to send a letter. They had to send me on back 3 weeks later. Same thing with traffic to get the fatalities. Same thing with our safety group. So those gatekeepers were relevant because of their roles. Pulling everything to the cloud, remove that. And there's quite a bit of fight to make sure that they kept their relevance in those areas. So that was one piece. I think the other is when we started moving forward on adjustments, in some cases, we, the state, did it wrong. Instead of deciding that we're going to fix our workflows to ensure that we're efficient before we have a vendor build a system for us, we decided we're going to keep our crappy workflow and we're going to have a vendor build something to fit it. Very difficult concept to push forward on. So instead of moving forward with those inefficient workflows, we made sure now we adjust everything up front to make sure we're as efficient as possible before we get a vendor to build a system for us.
Thank you.
So the good thing about going last is I can say all the stuff they said. I would characterize, used a couple of words in some of our exec discussions when we're trying to push stuff forward. Organizational inertia, tends to be the thing that really holds us back, and especially with big organizations. Some people say, well, it's because you're unionized. It's the union thing that's holding you back. No, I've worked for, so those of you that know my resume, I've worked for like 15 different companies. The thing that creates that inertia is actually the size of the organization and the size of the entity that creates a bunch of the gatekeepers and the training hurdles that you need to overcome to get there. The other thing, and so this is a little bit of a risk, but the other thing that we're doing moving forward is we're not settling. I don't know if settling is the right word. We're not actually going after 100% of the people that are going to do this have to be ready to do this to go. We're never going to get to 100%. So the perfect is truly the enemy of the good in this case. Now the trick for us, and if you don't see me here next year, is because I made that risk level too big. But the trick for us is you figure out if it's 80 or 90 or 70%. Has to be able to be ready to go, and then you're going to break some stuff as you go. There's going to be breakage, but our feeling is for many of our enterprise systems now, if you don't push and if you don't make that happen, that inertia actually handcuffs us. And it's too hard for me because this change is going to require work for me to get to the new thing. I know it's better over there, but I'm comfortable here. I don't want to do extra work to get to there. We have to get over that hump. We have to figure out better ways of doing stuff, not pave the cow paths as Ed was talking about, but figure out the way to strategically pick the right decisions to move forward. And again, it's not going to be 100%. You have to get to a level of risk that the organization can tolerate, and then be able to move it forward, recognize you're going to have some breakage, but then celebrate the successes at the end.
So I once heard that when I started my early career, one of my mentor tells me that, well, the technology changes so fast, it's evolving almost every day. How can you become an expert in technology? So one thing I was told that if you only learn maybe 3 months ahead of everybody else, you are the expert in that area as a technology. So my question for you is, technology changed so much. How can we keep them up, and how involving technology has impact your organization today? And that's a big question. Who wants to start first? Yeah.
Maybe we can start with Doug down the line again, if that's okay.
All right. Well, we have in the state probably 25 major systems, and theoretically to build them over and over again costs like $50 million every time. And we just can't afford that. It's too expensive. If you do the math, which I'm not going to do in public because I was trained never to do math in public, it's a lot of money. So I think we have to move more and more toward the cloud services, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, like we do with Microsoft 365. We don't have to do anything with Microsoft 365, or you don't have to do anything with the Google Cloud type things. They're all built in, it all works. You just have to take advantage of it. So it really reduces the learning curve, and it speeds up your ability to adopt new technology and then keep it going. So if AI gets better, it's already built into Google Cloud better. If vision technology is better, it's built in already. Data analytics is already built in there, and they're going to keep making it better for us, so we don't have to write our own data analytics program or buy a separate one. And that's what we're looking for, is sort of that, one place to go for everything, where we're not having to update everything. It's already there for us.
Great point.
I guess for us, it's basically, it's been a struggle because when we look at all the technology and all of the advancements that are available in Google Cloud, it's like a kid in the candy store. Like, you can't choose one or the other. It's just so difficult. So we've had to really work with our account team and basically pick the certain things that were related to the mission or related to what our objectives were. And that's how we would just focus in on those things, to actually looking for the technologies that will connect those pieces together so that we can drive the outcome that we want.
So I don't know if there's much more to add to that, except to highlight that infrastructure as a service is where we're going to go. Even if we had the 50 million every year to upgrade our systems, we're just not good at it. I mean, the state in general is not good at maintaining a system, then upgrading as technology comes through. So better to ride the service.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's, the paradigm for how we do stuff is already changing, and it's going to change some more. And we have to figure out where do we invest our smart people to keep up with this stuff. We can't keep up with everything. Although I heard there's this search site that you can use to look up on your phone to find all kinds of information on the web. I forget what it's called.
I'm wondering the name of that. Yes, I'll Google it. I'll Google it.
Why don't you do that? But it is really interesting as you start to figure out how do you keep up. I actually, so this is an interesting story. It's a little bit off track, but I do an annual update for my staff on an all hands basis. So we just did it, and this is the deck was being prepared right about the time that ChatGPT broke on the scene. So I asked ChatGPT, sorry, Bard wasn't ready yet. So I asked ChatGPT, tell me about the information technology strategy for the University of Hawaii in 2023. And it gave me an answer that said, well, it's not quite ready because apparently not all of the data that was being crunched in ChatGPT was up to date. So it said, I'm only up to date to 2021. So I took 2023 out and then went ahead and spewed a bunch of stuff, which I can tell you we could totally use as presentations for strategy because a lot of that information is already out there. And as the AI elements develop, that's going to be something that we can also rely on to help inform the stuff that we do. So each of us individually doesn't have to be able to keep up with everything. We have to be able to gather all of the pieces. We have to be able to collaborate with all of our partners so that we can keep up. But it is a struggle as we try to figure out how to keep up with the changing tide.
Thank you, Garrett. And by the way, we do have seats up front for those that want to come sit. So please don't be shy if you would like to sit down. There's seats up front. We now have a couple of individual questions for Doug, Mark, Ed, and Garrett. And the first one is around safe travels. Doug, looking back at the beginning of the pandemic and when the world kind of shut down, so many lessons learned, I think, were gleaned from deploying an application in 4 to 6 weeks. Could you share some of those lessons learned? And then what do you think the role of artificial intelligence will play in government going forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm glad Safe Travels is over. Probably everybody else is too that had to stand in line at the airport at any time. But it worked really well, and as I mentioned earlier, we had 12.1 million people actually use the application over the course of a couple of years. I think the first thing is business analysis has to be a skill set that IT has. We have to be able to go out and talk to the business and figure out what they need. We basically had 6 weeks to design this application. I talked to lots of people. What do you need from this? What do you need from this? And it was, the airlines wanted something that was very easy for them. The counties wanted something that was good for enforcement. The airport wanted something that they could get people through real fast. Department of Health didn't want to let anybody in anyway. You know? So it kind of became this trying to analyze the business part of what was going to happen and then design it. And we made a big Visio chart that had all the parts, including data things and data analytics and AI that we knew was possible with Google. And then we met with the various vendors. We showed them, here's what we want to do. They were very quickly able to tell us, yeah, we can do this part, but not that part. That's the first thing I think we learned was the importance of business analysis. And the second thing I will say is to pick the right partner, because I can tell you I knew Daniel and Amanda from other things. We had done proofs of concept and prototypes with them before, and we'd worked with Google, and I knew they would go to the wall. They would go to the president of Google and make sure we got what we needed to make this thing work. Because basically we're betting the safety and economy of Hawaii on this application working properly, and I knew they would be that way for us. And then I think the importance of a help desk, you know, that I probably undervalued before Safe Travels. That, you know, for everything we do, I hear people all the time saying, we're just going to build this app so people can do this or that. And then I'll ask them, well, what's your help desk going to be? And they haven't thought about it, you know, and they're going to be thousands of people calling your phone numbers and wanting information. And that's where the call center AI and the chatbots came in so important, because they can answer the phone 24/7 and they can answer a lot of the easy questions. So we do need to use those kinds of things. And then most users are very tech savvy, more than we thought probably. And the final thing I'll mention is that there's a real hunger for data anytime you have data. So people wanted to see the results and the counts and who was coming from where and which airline and who was sick, and you know, so there was a hunger for data, and I think that's true for every system. Managers, executives really want to know what intelligence is coming out of that work you're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So maybe, Ed, I have a question for you. So can you maybe talk about the role of data or smart data analytics, maybe specifically for the project we're going with the Climate Insight and the safety analytics?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for us at DOT, especially when we start looking at resilience, when we tell everybody in the room, resilience is important, we got to address sea level rise and adapt to what we know is coming. Everybody in the room, if I poll you, you'll all agree that that's important. Until I tell you I'm going to spend all my money on that and not on the potholes next to your house, not on the surface streets that are in your area. So when we start looking at the opportunity costs that we have to weigh in these improvements, now it makes it very difficult unless we have the data to show you why it's important. So and how we're moving forward on projects, considering every project as a resilient project. So each project we do is more makes our system more resilient as we go forward. We're looking at all of our standards to consider whether they're standard or substandard now. We build everything based on 100-year storms. We've had 4 last year. 400-year storms in 1 year. So now we got to consider, is a 100-year storm the design standard that we should be considering? Now, definitely we should be considering higher, but once we do that, now our structures get bigger, our roadways get more robust, so the cost of everything goes up. And I'm not going to come out and tell you guys I can only do 2 projects next year versus 5 until I know I have the data to show why it's important. The platform that we built with Google helps us do that. Definitely includes all the preservation or the level of maintenance of each system, how good the roads are, how poor they are, how good the bridges are, how poor they are, what volumes we have on those routes, the safety issues that we've had on those roads. All of those things are there from a transportation perspective. But we got to consider more when we start looking at the world we're in now. So we have all of our 8 climate hazards that are affecting our systems, whether they're sea level rise or rock falls that are occurring because of extreme events happening more, being more extreme and happening more often. All of those are built into the system to make sure we can consider it. But we also got to consider what's important to the state. Every politician who won their elections last year all ran on housing. So if we're not considering housing and where housing developments are on the system and ensuring that our infrastructure supports those developments, then we're not really focusing our resources towards what's important to the state. So we consider that. We also got to consider equity. When we do projects in different areas, we got to consider who's being affected by these different projects, good or bad. So all of those things that we can consider, we could look at in a box. or we can throw them on a platform. In the past, we couldn't do it. Now we have 20 layers on our platform to consider. So in a perfect world, I turn all the layers on. When I see dark red in different areas, that's my priority. And that's where I can tell the public, this is where we need to focus our resources because that's what the data suggests. That's on the project delivery side specifically for resilience, to ensure that we can show everybody how we're using your public funds. More importantly though, and I guess more at risk, more often daily, there's a safety issue on our system. We kill 107 people on our highway system every year. 107 people die on the state and county routes that you drive every year. And for some reason, we feel it's okay. I mean, it happens every year, and it keeps happening every year. The way we set up our system in the past was reactive. When somebody dies, then we make adjustments. We're resetting the way we do business to ensure that what happened to Sarah Yara last week doesn't have to happen in the future. We're making sure that we run our system and layer out additional information that allows us to put mitigations in place, hopefully prior to a fatality. What Google has helped us out with. So we don't have the equipment to collect speed data on all of our routes. For us to do it would probably cost us about 120 million, just to put up rudimentary speed collection data. Then it would cost us another couple $100,000 a year just to maintain it. Or we can just buy it from them. When we get it from them, we can just layer it into the system. So we know exactly how fast, on average, or in particular, people are running every day in different areas. In addition to that, I can get hard braking data on the system. So they can let me know where we have preemptive stops throughout the system. Now, if we have hard braking data consistently at a spot, something's up. There's something in that area that's creating friction for drivers in that area. So we can send people out immediately to start looking at those and put mitigations in place before a crash or fatality occurs. So we can be more proactive to things rather than reactive. So all these improvements that you guys are seeing, these no rights on reds, these all-phase crossings, roundabouts, raised crosswalks, all are based on that data when we see speeds through those areas. We're now working with Google to see how we can identify more pedestrians and bicyclists. Very difficult for us to get volumes in systems unless we measure it in person, but they can get the data for us. So when we have that data, we can start looking at conflict points and minimize those conflicts before a crash ever happens. So to me, that's the power of data, first, to make sure we can justify our decisions to the public and to our legislators, and second, to make sure that we can stop this rash of fatalities that have been occurring every year.
Thank you, Ed.
Proactive versus reactive is definitely something, we're hearing a lot in the transportation industry. I feel like Ed coined that and now everyone's saying it. But it's a great approach, really, to look ahead and be in that proactive role. Mark, we've had the pleasure of partnering with you on several projects at Department of Human Services so that you can serve your customers and, a very vulnerable population with your constituents more effectively. Can you please talk about a specific project or initiative you are particularly proud of and why?
Sure. So for Human Services, I think, like I said before, our cloud journey really began at the beginning of COVID. And through the things that we've had to respond to, it allowed us to jumpstart a lot of what we're trying to do when it relates to customer service. And how do we better serve the public in terms of when they interact with us and how they interact with us. So I can't name a single project that we've been working on that stands out, because they're all equal. They're all a part of this larger ecosystem of services that we need to stitch together to provide the best service or deliver our services to the public. So we do things with language, and we've talked about that a lot. We do things with Google Cloud in and of itself, so we're building some of our most major applications purely in the cloud, and that's where they'll live. The other things that we've done is we've stood up VDI in a matter of like 3 weeks, and that helped us respond to COVID and the telework capability. We've also looked at sort of working with you folks on iterating our contact center capabilities. So we've gone through 3 changes of platform systems now in terms of our call center capabilities. We're looking at chat, we're looking at virtual voice agents, we're looking at stitching together systems that aren't purely Google Cloud or Google Cloud services, but making all of those things work together, whether it's a help desk ticketing system for the constituents, whether it's the phone systems, and again, what I'm going to be proud of when we actually finish what we're doing, we're well underway, is imagine a day that you can call a state department or the state, and basically from the first call you get, whether it was a virtual agent that answered or you started out on a chat, and you got connected to a human, and then as you got passed around, like let's say you started out with problem A, and then that person was like, okay, they helped you, and then you needed help on something that was slightly different. I could pull in these people, and traditionally what we've saw with the previous 2 iterations of our call center was that's sort of the black box that happens. I'm not sure if you guys in the public have this pet peeve as well, but when I call a company and I say, here's my problem, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Let me transfer you to X. And then they transfer you to X, and then basically you're just dropped off there. And then they're like, how can I help you? And like, the other guy didn't tell you what happened? And you're like, no, okay, well, let me tell you. And then you have to repeat this thing 3, 4, 5, or however many times you're transferred over to somebody else. What we're trying to bring together as far as our contact center is not necessarily first call resolution, but resolution nonetheless. And I'll put it this way. When you start off with that call, the first agent comes on, I transfer you. Instead of forwarding you to the next person, we're gonna pull you in and we're gonna merge that call, and that way it becomes a multi-party call. And so whether the first agent needs to drop off or stay on, Google's holding that main session, right? And so we get the telemetry data. We get all of the voice recording capabilities, we get all of the transcript capabilities, we know call length and all of that stuff. And even if it goes from 3 people within our department, and ultimately if we build a directory that connects to other departments within the state, you can start off with the human services call, and then maybe ultimately get to a transportation call, as long as we know. But that session from start to end will be captured throughout the whole thing. We'll be able to provide that sort of service. And that, customer service-wise, is really important, right? Because aside from getting the information from more self-service capability, that's why we're building the chatbots and the virtual voice agents and integrating into our websites. That allows the citizen to come into our websites at 11:30 at night on a Saturday, right? When typically nobody's working. The other thing we do is, again, we focus on ease and how do we make things easy for our customers, and we have to think differently too, right? Because a lot of times we're just delivering something, and we don't sort of put ourselves in the customer's position. Right. So we have to really think forward in that way to switch the viewpoint, or just like when you have your camera, you got to turn the front-facing camera to yourself, right? And basically understand what it looks like when you're on the other end. The other piece, again, building on cloud, building on new services, building on modern technology allows us to be more responsive. Not to say that it's reactive, but being responsive is also part of being proactive too, right? Yeah. Because when we see new technologies available, when we see iterations and improvements, we can explore that, we can innovate. And then if that works, then we can start to move forward and pushing that into production incrementally. So I think everything that we've done so far is just that journey of how do we keep making improvements over time for the last 3 years now, and we'll continue to make those improvements for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Mark. So the next question is for Garrett. I know you spent quite some time in University of Hawaii dealing with a lot of young folks. What advice would you give for folks who want interested in technology, and probably when they graduate, they want to work for government sectors and then government services, and the panelists maybe also want to chime in on that topics too.
So the generations, as we've watched, have actually changed. Their mindsets have changed quite a bit. So especially with the combination of some of the tech surges together with the pandemic bubble. It's a very interesting set of students that are coming through the system these days. Some are non-traditional, some are not your 18 to 21-year-old trying to do their 2-year or 4-year degree. Some of them are coming back, some are currently working, so we have a lot of part-time students in our system. And the thing that is really important for us, especially in the technology sector, is that the constant message that we're trying to push into the students that are preparing to enter the workforce, enter or re-enter the workforce, is it's not just about being able to deal with this or deal with, it's not the picture of, okay, I can make $200,000 a year because I can work in my closet, and somebody else is going to deal with all the other stuff that just feeds me, and then I get a pile of money. That story is, number one, it was a story. It was true in a very small number of situations, but it totally gets blown out. And then, when you try to demonstrate the experience for the students that are up and coming, it's really about rounding out their skill sets and making sure they are, number one, first and foremost, employment ready, and they are ready for the job market. We've been trying to do a couple of things. Now, change takes time, but we've been trying to do a couple of things within both our faculty, our programs. We're also working to some extent with the public K-12 and the private K-12s to try and push that message down into the high schools, as well as for tech careers into the middle schools as well. You have to have those technical skills, or at least the ability to take on the technical skills in order to be a productive worker in the workforce. So the message in a lot of cases is make sure you stay on your STEM track for technical careers. Make sure you stay on your STEM track. Make sure you can talk to people. Make sure you can collaborate with your teammates. Everybody's like, I got a group project and I don't want to work with a group. Can I just do it myself? The answer from the instructor should be no. The purpose of this thing is to make sure you understand how to work when you're workforce ready. That applies to research and teaching too. It's not just for workforce. It's a really important message that we need to push into our students. We try to do it on a regular basis. We actually have an excellent collaboration of employers around the state right now, convened by the Chamber of Commerce, the IT Sector Partnership. I think a bunch of you or a bunch of your organizations belong. Really big deal. We have lots of traction from our private sector employers as well, because they are consumers of our product. And it is important to make sure that our product aligns with our customers. So as service delivery, as education service delivery, our students are our customers, but the employers are the customers of our product. So it's important to make sure all of those pieces are aligned going forward. To the public service thing, this is not your parents' or your grandparents' government service. It's not the plantation thing. It's really, there's a lot of innovation happening in government services. I mean, I'm really inspired by the stuff that Ed just talked about, that Doug and Mark talked about. There's lots of good things happening in public service these days. And it's really important to make sure that we can leverage that with the new talent coming into the workspace so that we can grow the talent locally. I'm fine with being the farm that provides the skills for people to hire on the mainland to work for Google. Those are actually success stories, and the more we have an ability to export that talent, as long as we grow enough for local, but the ability we have to export that talent raises the value of that talent. So it's not that we need to have folks look myopically at very specific things, but it's really to broaden the reach and broaden the vision so that they can look at really a range of careers to make it happen. We started to spin up some internship and apprenticeship programs within the university, working with some of our private sector partners. Seems to be working pretty well so far. Keep our fingers crossed, but we'll continue to push on that side. And the goal is really to make the candidate pool larger and deeper for everybody, and at the end, everybody benefits.
Any other thoughts adding to this? I know that if you need talents, just look for you, right?
Sure. We're happy to do referrals.
Yeah, the first thing I tell people is come work for ETS and don't talk to these guys. But what advice I really do give people is try and work in IT while you're going to school for IT, get actual real world experience. I think that helps a lot, helps turn theory into reality. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I tell them is if you're not doing that, or even if you are, participate in hackathons or codathons or other fun activities like that on a team, you know, so that you get to do all the aspects, not just the coding usually, but the business analyst and all the things that we need, even the marketing of the project that you're eventually going to present at the end of and the state has a hackathon for high school and college students that we run. I think we've had 7 now. So these are great opportunities for them. So as much real world experience as people can get, I think it really helps them a lot.
On our side, we try to make sure that everybody understands what an exciting time it is to be in transportation. There's tons of money out there right now. So DOT is trying to make sure that we are a profit center for federal funds coming into the state as much as possible. And there's additional funding that's available to move us forward in innovations. Right now, we've reset all of our data points to ensure that we have a platform that all of our employees and the public can consume the data that we have. But the data that we have right now is minuscule compared to the data we're going to collect into the future. So understanding that, no matter what we hire you for, whether you're an engineer or a planner or an administrative person, you're going to be in IT in DOT. That's just the future. That's the way we're going to operate. So anybody coming into industry definitely benefits from having that background, and we really appreciate UH as being a really strong partner to ensure that all of the engineers and planners and the like that are coming through are all trained in some way, shape, or form on that background to help us out as we move forward into our data needs.
And I'll build on all 3 of them. And so, again, I think I too appreciate that the UH could become the pipeline, the farm for delivering local talent here. I think that's really important as well. And we really need to not just consider the success story of some local kid going out there and getting a job at Amazon or Google or whatever on the mainland, but how can we build that local talent here? Yes. Right? And how can we enrich sort of their lives by being able to stay home and contribute? And I think state government or Fed or government in general, it's one of the better opportunities to leverage, especially with way things are going now, ever since COVID and just prior to COVID as well. You know, we've been forward thinking, we've been innovative, and we've been trying to leverage new technologies and moving away from the legacy stuff and the legacy mindset. And so if we can continue to get a good pipeline coming out of the high schools into college and then working in state government, like we are the largest employer, like by far, single entity government. And so with leveraging both state funds and federal funds, like there's opportunities there that you would get as a student or as a Hawaii resident that you would get only if you were like in a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 100 company, right? These are the opportunities that we can provide to the local residents here who choose to live and work in Hawaii. And I think that's well, for me, that's the vision of success that I want to see 10, 20 years down the road, that we've got a good local pipeline supplying government workers, private sector workers, and even our consulting and local vendor partners here. If we can continue to build that ecosystem of being able to move from private sector to government, from government to private sector, from school to any of those routes, and then being able to cycle them through, and then get experience from one government agency to another, and whether it's like starting out at ETS, because Doug snipes everybody, and then coming into human services or transportation. Like that's sort of what we need to be focusing on as well, and I think that's really important.
So let me just add one more piece before I forget. This is not just a UH thing. So in working with the local community of employers, we are also working with our friends at HPU, at Chaminade, at BYUH. They all have wonderful programs as well. And you know, it's so this is not just a UH public. This is where we're going to make the investment. We are working collaboratively with all of them, and again, they each have excellent programs in several different areas. I know The city, in fact, had been working, I don't know if Mark's here, but the city, in fact, had been working with HBU for a long time on pipeline of technical people. Chaminade has a really good data science program. They're pumping out a bunch of folks now out of the data science program. Small school, right? They're our neighbors, but they do some really good work in that space. So there are a cluster of us in the higher education space that are working together to make sure that we can make the pool bigger. So it's not just a UH thing, it is a higher ed thing that all of us in the state of Hawaii have to come together on.
Thank you. Any other final closing thoughts before we wrap up? We really appreciate your time. It's truly under your leadership that a lot of these really fantastic innovation projects are, affecting the Hawaiian lives on a daily basis, and we just appreciate your time. And with that being said, we're going to take a small 15-minute break, and then we'll go on to our next session. Thank you,
Thank you.
gentlemen.